Lowell Rizeouw is a psychotherapist and homeopathic specialist who founded Zenergetics in London, England. With over 25 years of experience in healing sciences, Lowell has practiced psychiatry, psychology, homeopathy, and radionics. Lowell has assisted patients in overcoming illnesses ranging from mental and emotional disturbances, cancer, chronic fatigue, and learning disabilities. Alrighty. So welcome to the Mastication of Education podcast. I'm here with Lowell Rizeouw, and today we're going to talk about psychotherapy, energy medicine, and a whole slew of other things. So I just want to say first, how did you get into psychotherapy and eventually energy medicine?
It was really just my own personal experiences, and I read a book which fascinated me so much that I decided that I'll look for a therapist. And it was a book by Wilhelm Reich, who was an Austrian psychoanalyst, who became later on a very famous scientist, but there's quite an interesting story around him. When I read the book, it was just amazing. So I thought I'll find a therapist. I found a therapist. I found the work incredible, the transformation. It just changed my life. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to train in this because I would love to pass it on to others. And that was the beginning.
What was the name of the book?
The author was an Austrian. His name was Wilhelm Reich. And the book, it was the first book he wrote. It was actually called The Function of the Orgasm. But it was based a lot around body psychotherapy. So one says that he was the originator of body psychotherapy. He was initially a psychoanalyst, and then he started to work with his clients on their body, on their breathing, on their structure. And he brought in the mind and the body together.
Interesting. How did you begin Zenergetics?
I started Zenergetics when I moved to England. I moved to the UK about 7 years ago. And before that, I was living in Germany for about 40 years. And I started the company because I was working, basically, all of the work that I do is based on energy. So it's on the science of energy. And it's looking at a person very much from their energetic dynamics. So an emotion is also an energy form. The energy within our body dictates the state of our organism. A thought is also energy. So a lot of the work that I was doing was really looking at the energy flow in the body, what hinders energy flow. And my brother came up with the name Zenergetics. He said it was the Zen of energy medicine, so he called it Zenergetics.
When I was reading, when I was first introduced to your website, I definitely saw a lot of a lot of things that I hadn't really seen before in other medicine practices and other psychotherapy healings that I've seen. Is there anything that I guess is kind of similar to, something that some people might be more familiar with? I guess maybe things like acupuncture or other sorts of psychiatry.
Yeah, I would say energy medicine is very, very old. So as you say, acupuncture is a very old method, which is, again, working towards getting the energy flow in the body by putting the pins and stimulating the energy of the different meridians and so on. But homeopathy is a very energy-based medicine. The body-oriented psychotherapy is looking at the energy flow within the body and where it's not flowing. Let me think, bioresonance is considered an energy-based medicine. There's quite a few, and as I say, it's older medicine which is now coming back to the forefront.
See. How does bioresonance cure certain diseases, and what are some of the ailments that this type of therapy can cure?
I would say it can cure any kind of therapy, and it's based on the principle that at the core level, we're energy. We're made of atoms. So every cell is made of an atom, and atom is pure energy. And it's away from the old doctrine that we're a chemical system, we're a mechanical chemical system, which we're not. Behind that is an energy system. And the bioresonance, exactly as the word says, the instruments go into resonance with the organism, and that way they can measure the energy levels of particular organs, let's say the resonance of the liver or the heart or the kidney. And by working at the energetic level, transformations will then take place at a physical level. So if you imagine a cell is informed by the energy around it, if that energy is in disharmony or dissonance, within time, the cells will also go into a state of dissonance. And when you rebalance the energy, then the cell within time will also find its balance again.
In the world of academia, has there been like any, I guess, peer-reviewed or in other scientific studies showing that, you know, with bioresonance, you actually can make these changes at the cellular level?
There's actually many, but they're not really in the mainstream. So they tend to go away from the mainstream medicine because they're looking at a different paradigm. So a lot of these studies are not really shown. They're kept in the background. But there are quite a few out there which just show that these methods work. But one of the main problems is that because you're working with energy, you're working with the organism at a very sensitive level. And so you don't have those crude changes as you do with the chemicals. So medicine per se is like taking a sledgehammer, and whoever you hit with that sledgehammer is going to respond in the same way. Whereas when you're working with energy, you're working at a very individual level. So everyone is going to respond differently to the energy input that you put in.
And so how does resonance treat like the disorders such as depression and anxiety?
It's a good question, because depression and anxiety is really a disturbance at an emotional or psychological level. So in the system with which I work with, we say there's different states or different bodies that we have. So we have a physical body, which is solid, liquid, and gas, which medicine today recognizes. But beyond that, we have different states of energy, which is actually pure matter, which is vibrating so fast that we don't perceive it, we don't see it. And generally we say we can't measure it, whereas with bioresonance, we can measure that energetic level. Beyond that, we have an emotional level where our feelings take place. And again, the feelings we can't see or measure, but we can measure the response of the physical body to the emotions. So you might feel sadness, which we can't measure, but when your body responds to that energy and you cry, then we can see that you're sad, or when you're angry and you start shouting. And on a mental level, we have the same dynamic. We have our thought processes, which again, we can't see or measure, but we can see when the physical body responds to our thinking. So as an example, you might say, you might think, I'd like a cup of tea. That's just a thought. But then the body responds to that thought, makes a cup of tea. So the physical body is really just an expression of what's happening at an energetic level. And the bioresonance helps us to define, where is the problem? Is the problem emotional? Is it mental? Is it energetic? Is it physical? And I think that's the big difference with the medicine today. They're just looking at it to say it's a chemical problem. Whereas we're saying, let's say you have an emotion which you've been taught as a child not to express. And when you keep holding that energy of grief within you, it's going to turn on you and create melancholic thoughts. Or if you have a lot of anger, which you've never learned to express, that energy of anger remains in the body. And often we then turn that energy against us. We start attacking ourselves with our feelings. So we might get guilty. We're not good enough. we don't do things right. That's that energy of anger, which is not going outward, but it's going in and polluting ourselves and our thinking. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, I was going to say it actually goes into what I was going to ask next, which is so can bioresonance in energy healing really target trigger points? Because I know, like, in my experience with in the Army, I firsthand have witnessed, fellow friends of mine that have, when a certain sound or sight just triggers them to a traumatic experience that they had, and it doesn't matter that it's not going on right now in their world. They're already back into whether it was 5 years ago when they were in a very dangerous situation, and it seems like that's usually can be the biggest cause of like the depression and anxiety, because then after that it just starts to spiral into they were in that moment, to come back out of it takes a little while. So yeah, I was wondering, how it was works for really targeting trigger points in individuals.
I've had really good results with that, because if you imagine on the physical level, if you eat food which has a lot of toxicity in it, and your body doesn't have or can't get rid of all of the toxin, let's say it's heavy metals, which is in your food or the chemicals, it'll store it somewhere in the body, usually in the connective tissue. And if it gets the opportunity at some point in life, it'll get rid of it. And it's the same when we've had a massive traumatization and it's been too big for our psyche to actually to be able to deal with it and integrate it. It stores that within the emotional body. And every time there's a resonance, there's a sound which brings back that memory, that trauma is reactivated until you can actually go in and then work with that trauma and integrate it into the psyche, so that the psyche can say, okay, I've dealt with that problem. And using the bioresonance, there are frequencies which have a resonance with traumas, with deep-seated emotional shock, as an example, because it's still an energy form, it's a vibration, it's a particular vibration, and so you can modify or treat that vibration with a vibration which is similar. Everything in the manifest and unmanifest world is in vibration, and each has its own signature or its own frequency.
So are you able to then
Sorry, could you say that again?
are you able to what's often called auras, the outer spectrum field of the body?
The auric field.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, again, if you imagine that we have these different bodies all radiate, all vibrating at different frequencies, the physical body is quite dense. It's vibrating quite slow. Water is vibrating, the fluids are vibrating more, the gas more. But once you go into the subtle levels, because they're vibrating faster, they tend to overlap outside the physical body, which is what we call the aura. But if you go into that deeper, we're basically 99.999% space when you go to a quantum level. That space is filled up with the other vibrations, which are at higher rates of vibration. So the physical body is actually mostly space at a quantum level. That space is filled up with emotional matter, and it's also filled up with mental matter. And that's why you can have a strong emotion, which is in the area of the liver and will affect your liver. So that's what, when we say the aura, we sometimes think of it as a different layer outside, but it's actually inside and outside. And so, yes, you can go in and you can affect it with a frequency.
Yeah, I've read a couple science journals that talked about the auric field and how it was actually measured. Just using different equipment before, and it's just amazing where it'll always seem in the mainstream science that that'll be called quack science, or oh no, it's not proven, when there's actual physical peer review proof in these journals that it exist. Do you think there's like a certain agenda with that might be trying to keep away people from really understanding the full composite of how the body works?
I would say very much so, because, for example, Wilhelm Reich that I mentioned at the beginning, he was persecuted by the FDA. He's one of the few scientists whose all his books were banned and burnt. His equipment was burnt and smashed because he was looking to free humanity. He was looking to get a person free of their conditioning. And who did a lot with frequency medicine, was also persecuted. His laboratory burnt down. A lot of his discoveries disappeared. I think there are agendas behind it, because as long as we still believe that we're just a physical body and we can treat that physical body with chemicals only, the pharmaceutical industry naturally will have power over that. But once we see that we're more than just a chemical structure or a mechanical structure, then we're going into frequency, and that's difficult to, the people who are making money at the moment off the chemicals obviously don't want people to be working with the frequencies.
Yeah, with that said, with the best of your knowledge, how did the modern medicine that we have today begin to replace homeopathy at the turn of the 20th century?
It's very fascinating. In America, there was most of the medicine in the last century, the 19th century, was mostly homeopathy. It was one of them, I think they had 25 hospitals in America which were just running on homeopathy. And homeopathy is a science. It's over 250 years old, I think, now. So it's a science that has held up over time. And if it didn't work, it wouldn't last so long. And from my understanding, it's really in the 1920s where the oil industry saw that they could make money out of the pharmaceuticals, which were, a lot of them were byproducts, they're chemicals, that this movement went to shut down anything which was not in line with the pharmaceutical industry. So homeopathy was shut down, Ronald Reich was shut down, people like Reich were shut down, Tesla was shut down. Many people where they were using frequencies of free energy were all shut down, because there's a lot of money to be made in the pharmaceutical industry.
How would you describe like cures like in homeopathy? Is that a similar concept to how mainstream science says vaccination works?
Not really, because the vaccination is too crude. The basic principles, you could say yes, whereas the principle of homeopathy, the like with like, as an example, is that if you were to take up, when your body is ill, and we go on the basis that the body is phenomenally intelligent, it's been developed over millions of years, it's very sensitive. And if, for example, you eat something which is poisonous, the body will respond to get back into a state of balance. It'll create diarrhea, it'll create sweating, it'll create nausea, it'll create a fever to protect you. And what homeopathy does says, okay, let's support the body in exactly the way it's working. Let's give it energy with the same frequency. So if someone was healthy and you would give them the homeopathic remedy, they would develop diarrhea, nausea, sweating, fever, and so on. So you're actually supplying the body the energy or the frequency in exactly the same way it's needed so that it can overcome its problem quicker.
What's your overall opinion on vaccines in general?
I think the principle of it, that you will stimulate the immune system with a little bit of the toxin, was the original of it. And in one sense, it makes sense. So you give a very tiny amount, you stimulate the immune system, and then the immune system will have the memory of that particular virus or whatever the toxin was. The trouble is, it's now developed to such an extent the children already are getting vaccinated in the first days of life. They're getting 10, 20 vaccines within a month, and then another month going in there. And in the meantime, the vaccines are not just the pure substance. They have so-called adjuvants in there, which is designed to stimulate the effect of the vaccine. And they contain poisons. They contain mercury. They contain aluminium. They contain formaldehyde. And all of these are poisons. And when you give it to a small baby, where the blood-brain barrier is not developed, all of those poisons will go into the brain, they'll go into the nervous system. And then the other problem is that we have a baby or a child's immune system is not developed. And normally, if you take a virus in, it'll go through the breathing system, it'll go through your nose or your mouth, where a big portion of your immune system is. It's not injected straight into your blood. So a vaccine is bypassing that whole structure of the immune system and putting the poison straight into the organism where actually there's not really such a strong immune system. And that becomes very dangerous.
Yeah, I could tell from my deployed to Iraq with the Army, we had to go through so many shots and vaccines. I remember anthrax was one of the big ones that we had to get, and I just remember, afterwards, the next day or two, just feeling so sluggish and, just feeling real sick. I would always feel that way with the flu vaccine as well. And I haven't had any vaccines or shots in about a dozen years since. And I very rarely get sick. I just, work, try to eat decent and exercise. And I just really think that there's just, too much of an overload on these things. I think a lot of them, might just be, very redundant. Maybe some of them, I'm not saying all of them are. I'm, sure some of them might have a good function, but yeah, I totally agree. As far as the, the kids being injected with so many things at such a young age, your body's naturally, go through illnesses. I remember as a kid, canker sores, chicken pox, all sorts of. But the body has to, it can build up naturally. And which is what I wanted to ask you next. As far as everyone, did you think that might have been something that was necessary? Do you think it was rushed? Do you think it's something that people would just develop an immunity to?
From my understanding, we've had the COVID virus around for hundreds of years. It's nothing new. And our body, our immune system, if it had been left alone, has the ability usually to fight off most viruses. And I think basically it's at two different levels. I think the physical body over the many years now has become very weak through the vaccination as children, through the food, which is generally very bad. It doesn't contain good energy within it. The food has a lot of chemicals in it. We're engulfed in the sea of radiation, which the body has to deal with through all the mobile phones, Wi-Fi. So our bodies naturally have become weak. And then by using, it's not strengthening the body, it's actually putting another toxin in the body, which is another overload. And from my understanding, those were never proven. So we were still in a test process. So officially, the trial is up until 2023. And I think that's quite risky to put something into someone's body that we really don't know the long-term effects of it. And let alone, we don't even know the short-term effect of it. So I think that has been very dangerous. And it would have been better, I think, to build up immunity and not to weaken immunity further. And I believe the British government has done a study which shows that drops the effect of the immune system by 25% irrevocably. That's what the British study shows.
And I think on top of that, I remember that Pfizer, Albert Boole, I believe is his name, not work as well as they hoped. So the fact that we're still, pushing so many different people is really quite scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was interesting that the UK at the beginning, Boris Johnson said, we're going for herd immunity. And then for some reason, he stepped back and said, no, we've got to. But I agree with you. Herd immunity at the end of the day is what's kept humanity alive for millions of years.
Could you give a brief description of the equipment, devices that use the radio on?
Yeah, I use two main ones. One is bioresonance, and one is a system which is called radionics. The radionics was developed around 1900, 1910, and it was developed on the principle that we're an energetic system, and so we're radiating this information all the time. Again, if every cell is made up of atoms, atoms are radioactive, which means they're radiating at particular frequencies. And the devices were developed like a radio, which tunes into the human frequencies. And the device can be tuned into particular frequencies. It can be fine-tuned. So basically the instrument will, let's say, pick up all of your energy, and then it's possible on the system to fine-tune it into your liver or your kidney, and to measure how strong that signal is coming from that particular organ. And if it's too high or too low, it's possible then to treat the organ. But it's it's very, very much like a radio. You're sitting in a room right now with millions of phone conversations around you, TV stations around you, radio stations around you. You're not aware of any of them. But with the right device that's capable of tuning into particular frequencies, with a fine tuning possibility, you'll be able to pick up particular radio stations or TV stations. And the radionics works exactly on that principle, but as I say, within the realm of the human frequencies. And I use that a lot to help me assess what's going on at the very high levels, like the emotional or psychological. It's not just the physical, whereas the bioresonance is working more at a physical level, the physical electromagnetic field of the body. And the radionics goes into higher realms. And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing it for a long time, and I always find it fascinating, because often fascinating what you find behind a symptom.
So how long have
it's clearly an emotion.
Oh, sorry.
How
long have the electromagnetic radiation device been around for?
So really at the beginning of the last century, that's the time where Tesla was working with frequencies, Marconi was working with it, Albert Abrahams, who started to work with the radionics. They were all around that era where humanity was really developing the science of frequencies, radiation, and so on, radio, telegraph. That was all being developed at the beginning of the last century.
Yeah, it's just always amazing, like trying to picture so much of the things we talk about that go on at the molecular level, radio. It's amazing that there's equipment out there that can measure this, but it's almost like, unless you're in a specialty field, the general public, it's almost like a magic trick. Like, I try to picture molecules, radio waves, but it's not something we physically see every day. We know they're around, but it's not something that we really, I guess, know that we're interacting at the same time. So it almost seems kind of foreign to us.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, we can only, our nervous system can only pick up about 2% of what's really going on. So if you look at how tiny the light spectrum is, the color spectrum is, and you look at all the other frequencies either side of that, that's all we're tuning into is a tiny little bit. But there's gamma rays, there's beta rays, there's theta rays, X-rays, radio waves, all of that is there. It's a vibration. And it's just with the right equipment that you can tune into it and pick it up, that you can accept that it actually exists.
Recently, do you think there's been new equipment or technology that have definitely built upon the existing technology as far as electromagnetic in general?
I think so. I think it's really a field which is growing quite rapidly now. I know there's equipment there that helps to protect you against all the radiation around you. So they are developing more and more sensitive devices which can actually tune in and pick up those energies.
With that said, just to the best of your knowledge, a lot of the people that are equipment, are they more companies or are they more with companies in those industries of health?
You keep breaking up a little bit, but if I understood you correctly, for example, the bioresonance system that I have was developed by a German professor, and the hardware and the science was put together by a Swiss company. So they really are working with physicists, with engineers, with people that specialize in electronics and computer science. So it is a very scientific basis within it. Whereas some of the other devices, they can be a little bit, out there, more on the metaphysical side. But a lot of the bioresonance devices really are measuring physically the vibrations within the body.
To touch on psychotherapy, how do you say psychotherapy differs from general counseling and therapy?
It's a difficult one. I would say they're very similar. I think they do go quite close together. I think psychotherapy can go deeper. So it really is looking at the psychodynamics, the dynamics of your thoughts. And it goes deeper, usually into the subconscious, where I would say counseling doesn't go so deep. It really is just as a supportive mechanism to help us through with particular states. But the psychotherapy is, as I say, it's delving deeper into your subconscious, what's driving your thought processes, what's driving your actions, and to try to get to the root of that and treat and heal at that root cause.
Do you have any experience with hypnosis? And if so, do you think it's a useful method?
I actually work with a very, very good hypnotist in London. And I was always a little bit skeptical, but once I've seen her work, it's phenomenal. We had a client who was having an eating disorder, and literally after one session, it stopped.
Wow.
So, I would say it is the subconscious that's driving us. And a good hypnotherapist can actually go into the subconscious level and in a way reprogram it, because it is a programming. It's often a belief system, and that can be changed at that level. So I would say definitely hypnosis done by a person who is good, it can be quite phenomenal, quite transformative.
Do you believe that most of the issues people have when they're getting, such hypnosis or psychotherapy, do you think it's just from, the experience of this life, or do you think it might be something deeper, whether it's, past lives and, other sorts of experiences we don't remember in this physical realm?
It's a difficult question because I have studied for about 30 years metaphysics. So I've delved very much into many spiritual books where they do talk about past lives and past experiences, and let's say the karmic processes. So the previous life, it will continue in this one. And we have then issues to resolve, and it's possible that we have symptoms which were actually started in a past life. But saying that, I've come to a point more to say, I don't really know. I know because I've read it, but I personally believe it's there. But I go more from the standpoint to say the problem is here and now, and how can we resolve it here and now? And if we resolve it here and now, it doesn't really matter where it's come from, we'll resolve it. Whereas often if we start delving, we're not dealing with what's going on now. And then we find an escape in a belief system that this has come from a previous lifetime. But the truth is we don't really know. So we're just delving into speculation. But having said that, from my studies, I would say yes, we do carry. It's based on the law of cause and an effect. So everything that is expressing itself now has a cause, and that cause can be anytime within this life or let's say previous lifetimes.
As far as the biochemical level that you touched on earlier, where mainstream science seems to say from, was there like a certain point, in history where it was? I know we talked about how homeopathy, began with mainstream science. Was there like you think something specific or a chain of events where the focus and the science, everything is biochemical, it has nothing to do with everything else, just the way the molecules are responding, for example?
Again, you keep breaking up, but if I understand it, I think basically it's forces of materialism that as long as they keep us in that paradigm that everything is material and there is no spirit, that belief system. And the minute we start to say, no, we're actually spiritual beings, and we start connecting to the level of spirit, which is more energetic, then the power of materialism falls away. And I would say a lot of what's going on now is an attempt to propagate this belief that we're just a materialistic system, that we need chemicals in us, that science knows all the answers. So we've tried to decouple everything from spirit, from the spiritual kingdom, by just propagating this belief that we're materialist, we're matter. And in many countries, spirituality has fallen away. If we just look at the last pandemic, there was so little concern about the spiritual well-being of people. And it was all around fear and take this chemical, it'll protect you. Whereas we never considered what it's doing to the old people who were shut away, who didn't have contacts. The burden on humanity from a spiritual perspective has been massive. So it's almost this, it's these two forces which are in a way in conflict. The materialistic, we're just this body, that's all we are. We're just made up of different chemicals and hormones that create our actions. And if we're depressed, it's because there's something wrong with the chemicals, all materialistic. Or to the other side, where we talk about spirit and spirituality, which is working through this physical body, which is working through these different levels, the mental, emotional, and physical body. And that opens a completely different world when you start to connect your inner spirituality.
How do you think the society that the gap could be bridged between more mainstream bio level and the more homeopathic, uh, that for spiritual beings?
I think the key is the heart. It's the love principle. The heart only knows unity, it doesn't see division. And the more we start thinking and living from our heart and not from our minds, we'll automatically start connecting with each other again. And at the moment, because we're in the mind and we've been taught that homeopathy is bad and allopathic medicine is good, we've created these divisions between the doctors and the homeopaths or the osteopaths. And the more we resonate with the heart, the more we'll see we're actually all one. We're all there because we want to heal humanity of its ills. So let's get together and use the different skill sets we have. And then it comes together again. So for me, it's the heart, it's the love energy, it's the energy of unity, it's the energy of oneness, of totality. And that will bring us all together.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the heart, because I was thinking to myself, it almost seems like we have a different mind in the heart. And sometimes, we're always taught to, think from the, but I've been able to put myself in certain states where I actually feel like I'm not listening to the mind, but the heart actually literally communicates completely different feeling. And I think that I don't know, maybe law away at the same time, the way we're conditioned.
It's far away, but I think this time is pushing us all into the heart. It's actually, I experience that the spiritual energies are very, very strong right now. I pick it up with the machines as well. It's incredibly potent, and it's calling us back to the heart, because the heart can't be conditioned. The heart always knows the truth. And as long as our minds are being manipulated to believe different things, we get drawn away and conditioned. Whereas the heart is purity. It knows. It picks up lies straight away. And I have the image that the mind is like a tree, but its roots need to be in the heart. And when the roots are deep in the heart, then what the mind produces will be beautiful. It will be very sweet. Whereas if it's decoupled, then the mind starts to create things which are horrific. And if we look what the mind today has created, atom bombs, wars, famines, inequality, hatred, division, it's all coming from the mind. So if we could reconnect the mind to the heart, do you want to see someone in Iraq or a different country killed? You don't. You know, and all of those problems, I think, will start falling away. And I think the more we resonate with our own heart, as you say, you're doing more, we're actually connecting to the cosmic heart, to universal love, unconditional love, through that instrument within us, which is always in resonance with the greater spiritual heart. So the more we connect to this, we're actually connecting to a huge energy field of unconditional pure love. And I think when that flows through all of us, we will transform this planet into a very beautiful place.
I agree with that, because I noticed such a difference between heart communication and mind communication. The heart, as you said, the heart communication, you don't feel the lies that you felt from the the indoctrination life experiences that you do with the mind. It's like more of a recording device. I had a good friend of mine is an emergency room doctor, and he said the same thing. He said, I wondered to myself how many of my thoughts are actually my own, because we're always so bombarded with information, and having to play a role, based on our profession or whatever it is that we're doing to survive. And we almost kind of forget who we are in that. As we are truly the answer.
Yeah, and as you say, we're just bombarded with information. Everyone has a TV in their homes, which they sit in front of and are mesmerized, and they believe what comes out of it to be reality, but that's just conditioning the mind. That's telling stories which are not true. But my sense is the more each of us connects to the heart, it's like a field. That field will keep getting stronger. So every single person is important. And each person that reconnects with their heart will be adding to that pool of energy from the love energy.
Absolutely. What do you think the difference is between biophysics and biochemistry?
I would say the physics is really moving into that higher dimension. It's seeing the world from a quantum level. It's looking at it from an energetic perspective. Whereas a biochemist is again looking at the body from a chemical perspective, which is much the physicist.
What advice would you give to any getting into the field of like what we would consider what's considered alternative healing, or anyone who's looking to get into that?
I lost you. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, the signal was good.
That's okay. I said, what advice would you give to any young people that are looking to get into the field of psychotherapy and anything that's considered, alternative?
I think in the meantime, there's a lot of different directions. And I would say to really try different courses, different trainings, and see which one resonates. But again, as we were saying before, listen to your heart, listen to what the calling is. And then I think one will start finding the right thing. And I think often from Krishnamurti, who always says that the answer is not important, but the question is important, because the question, through its resonance, will bring in the answer from outside. So if we want to heal others and we hold on to that, what's the best, I think we'll start to find and we'll be led to the right thing.
Yeah, on a random note, now that you just mentioned Christian Hurdy, I always find a good balance of Christian Hurdy and brother, Yuji Christian Hurdy. He was more, the brother was a lot more blunt and brash, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you can bring it down to a more situational, you know, I heard philosophical concepts, you know, that such don't argue how the fire started. Let's figure out how to, you know, put it out.
Yeah.
I always love to play. I think both those philosophies are very necessary.
Yeah, I think so. Especially in this day and age, we need both of them.
Do you have any other future projects coming up that you'd like to talk about?
We're constantly looking to develop, but for me, I'm looking to bring in more also light therapy, color therapy, sound therapy. I think they're all vibration again on different levels. That's something that really, really fascinates me, and I'd love to be able to bring that together with the bioresonance. I've taken on a center here in the UK, and I would love to develop a process where people can be led to their own inner calling, their own spirituality. So to include things like meditation and so on in the practice. But yeah, a lot of my work is the hope that we can unite, that we can work together. We can work as groups. I find working alone, we can only cover so much. So I'd love to reach out to other people who are like-minded, who maybe have a different speciality, and just bring them all in and work together.
With that said, before we conclude, is there any specific website, place where people can find you, look at your work, or contact you?
Yeah, it's my website is zenergetics.com. That's the best way. I have a link and an email address. There's some information on what we're doing on there as well. So that would be great. I'd love to hear from anyone who's interested to cooperate or wants advice, anything whatsoever would be great.
Outstanding. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the rest of the day as well.
Nice dialogue between the two of us that we could exchange both, and I just feel the connection, so I'm very grateful. It's great.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Signing
We'll be in
off.
touch.
Absolutely.
Thanks.